Hi again guys, and so we've got something a little bit different, or in fact very different in this particular video, especially for this channel, because as of course you'll have seen from the title, this is movie related, but it's more so gaming related, and of course this is not my gaming channel. That's HammerStudiosGaming, whereas this channel is more for movies. So the question is, why am I featuring this video here? Well, for two reasons, if I'm honest. One reason is to get a little bit more traffic and chatter done on this channel. I don't really need it as much on the other one, but also more importantly, I think the ties and the root of why I want this game to be made are more closely tied to movies than they are to gaming, which is a pretty strong reason to feature it here. Now, as you'll have seen from the title, this is my concept and what me personally, or what I personally would like to see in a modern version, if you will, of a The Thing based, John Carpenter's The Thing, survival horror game on like the PS4 or the Xbox One, whatever, doesn't really matter. Let's say PS4. Now, what I would like to see is something which I'll go into more in just a second, but to really set it up, I have mentioned on the channel before, and those who have watched my video reviews, my movie reviews will know, my favourite movie is The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing specifically. I also love the older one, The Thing from Another World. I love the book called Who Goes There, and also even the 2011 prequel I think has some very redeeming features. As I mentioned before, in again the review for that one, you learn more about the creature. The way it acts around people is different because it's set before Carpenter's film. It has its flaws, for sure, but I like it for what it does well. Now, with that all being said, there is already a survival horror game based around The Thing. I own it, I love it, it's a fantastic game, it's one of my favourites in fact. It was from the PS2 era, around 2002 I think it was released. The graphics are a little bit dated, I'll probably use some screenshots from the game so you can see what I'm talking about, but it's a great game. Third person, which I quite like, it makes a change for the horror genre. Not so much back then though, it's more the Resident Evil style. And in the game, you play, and of course you saw the spoiler alert at the start of this video, you play as a military guy who's sent in after the events of Carpenter's movie to find out what happened to the team. And you find out throughout the game that there is essentially a conspiracy going on to some degree between military and scientific personnel to try and militarize, or at the very least study, this creature and see how they can benefit from it in an aggressive kind of way. And of course that doesn't work out too well because of the nature of the thing. It doesn't exactly want to cooperate with humans, let's say. So that works very well for the game, and as I said, I love the game. Even the fact that the graphics don't look that good kind of works in the game's favour. I find it has a very creepy ambience to the visuals. The way the creatures come towards you with those badly rendered graphics is actually really effective. It looks cool, in a similar way again to the older Resident Evil games. But the one thing, and it really is the only thing that I dislike a little bit about that game, is that as great as it is from a storytelling point of view, it legitimately expands the lore and the universe of the movie, which is very limited to one location, but it doesn't give total respect, as understandable as it is, to the creature of the thing and the rules of the thing based in the movie and established in the movie. Because in the movie, we learn, among other things, how difficult it is to stop this creature and of course to kill it, in effect. In fact, they don't ultimately beat the creature. At the end of the movie, it's not dead, and if you read the graphic novels, it definitely isn't dead. It comes back stronger than ever. In the games as well, it isn't dead of course, but in the game you still get access to flamethrowers, machine guns, missile launchers even, and you can kill these little creatures that have come from the thing, be it skull spiders or bigger lumbering brutes or massive bosses. Ultimately though, firepower always gets the job done. Now, speaking of that specific phrase, firepower, that is something that I need to touch on. It's something which I've touched on before in this channel, but it's something which people still do not get. And it's kind of annoying me at this point because I don't think people can really be this dumb. I think they must be trolling. But I'm going to explain it just one more time for those who seem to find it difficult to comprehend. The thing cannot be killed with fire. Why do people keep on saying this? How stupid do you have to be to think that a flamethrower is going to kill this thing? And I can illustrate that it doesn't kill the thing very simply. The 2011 movie, as flawed as it is a prequel. It takes place before the events of Carpenter's film. What do we see happen in that movie? We see two scientists fuse together into the thing and become the twin-headed creature, one of the most iconic creature designs from both of the movies. What do they do to that creature? Well, they burn it with kerosene, of all things. They burn it to a literal crisp. It's dead, to all intents and purposes. Well, you're probably thinking, there's your proof. They can kill it with fire. Well, no, because kerosene burns real well, and they burn that creature real good. Far beyond what it would take to burn any kind of normal creature, or even an alien. You could kill a xenomorph with that kind of heat. So the thing should be dead, if that logic is true. But then go back to Carpenter's movie, which, remember, takes place after that 2011 prequel. They find that twin-headed creature, and what do? They bring it back to the camp, and it starts grabbing people again. It ain't dead. In fact, it's not even close. It doesn't even appear to be remotely injured. It's not making noise as they're poking and prodding it. It doesn't move. It just waits for a scientist to be on his own and attacks him with just as much ferocity as it had in the first film. So can a flamethrower kill the thing? No. Categorically not. In fact, it barely even slows it down, let alone kills it. Now, could you theoretically use fire to kill the thing? Potentially, yes. If you manage to get it sealed inside an inescapable incinerator, then you could theoretically burn it to ash. But who's to say that there aren't still cells inside the ash? But if you took it far enough, burning and reburning and reburning, you could potentially kill it. In case you hadn't noticed, a flamethrower doesn't do that. A flamethrower is very open to the elements, it's hardly an incinerator, and so that kind of fire would not have a chance at killing the thing. And neither does kerosene in a very direct way. They pour it all over that thing and burn it. Doesn't stop it, just slows it down for a little bit. Now, acid does have a strong potential to break down and kill the thing, and a couple of other horror monsters could potentially take it on, such as Splinter and the Blob. But in the game, that doesn't really have much relevance. The fire is the main issue, because in that 2002 game, one of the weapons which is very effective is a flamethrower. And in the movie, the flamethrower does hurt the thing, it makes it run away. But it does pretty much the exact opposite of stopping it. It makes it more angry, and it makes it bigger, and it makes it more aggressive, and it makes it turn into other crazier creatures. So that is something which I would like to respect more in my version, if you will, of the game. Because what I would like to have is a sequel, again, to the movie, but with a totally different timeline to the 2002 game, and also a totally different timeline to the graphic novel series. Now, what I would like to see is actually inspired by a couple of different things. I have three sources of inspiration for what I would like to see done in a good adaptation of the Thing game, or actually no, I shouldn't say that because the O2 one isn't bad, a better one, let's say. And those three sources of inspiration are Alien Isolation, the game, Fallout 4, the game, and a 1999 movie called Virus, which I reviewed recently, and I know for a fact a lot of you guys on this channel have a lot of love for. In fact, some of you are even annoyed at the scores that I gave to that movie. But the point is, my inspiration from that movie is that the majority of Virus takes place on a huge, say, military-style and even military-sized vessel, a ship. And it's full of pretty much endless corridors, blind corners, ducts that you could crawl through, wiring exposed and otherwise, lockers that you could hide in. It's literally the perfect environment for a survival horror game. Why more people haven't done this, I do not know, but the entire game would be set inside a research vessel. And the advantage of that, first and foremost, is that not only is it fantastic for a survival game as an environment, but it also pays a nice homage to the movie, because the movie is all about that can't get away kind of scenario, and this would be exactly the same. But basically, as far as the story goes, I don't have every single plot point in mind because it's not essential to, but the concept that I have in mind would be that it takes place very soon after, let's say within a week, maybe 2 at the most, and the distress signals that are sent out in the movie are actually intercepted by a research vessel rather than a close camp. Now, I'm not sure exactly where the location of the camp is in the movie in relation to the nearest body of water, but let's say it's not too far away. That's not too much of a stretch to believe. So let's say this research vessel is there in the sea, would it be? Sea/ocean, I'm not sure which. And this vessel is there. They intercept the signal from MacReady and the crew, and they send a search party. The search party finds the aftermath of the movie. Maybe MacReady's there, maybe you actually play as MacReady, that would be pretty cool, but at the same time, not necessarily, because it would be nice to have a new character, you don't need to have him again. But still, you could do that, you could have him as DLC, let's say. But let's say that him and Childs are both gone. Obviously the ruins wouldn't still be burning, it's simmered down, it's just a charred hull of what it was, in a similar way to the game, the 2002 game. But they take some samples, maybe they take a couple of the bodies, of course not knowing what they're dealing with, back to their research vessel. Now, what we know about the thing is that it wouldn't necessarily need to immediately attack those people. By this point, we've seen through 2 movies that the thing knows how to deal with people now. In the 2011 movie, it just bum rushes people, because it doesn't know what humans are like, it doesn't know what it's dealing with, and it just assumes that it can beat them. But by the end of that movie, it learns very quickly that humans are very resourceful. So by the time John Carpenter's movie comes around, it's wised up. It doesn't bum rush people anymore, it tries to blend in and tries to use the biggest advantage of humans, which is the ability to work together as a collective mind. Humans do that very well. We see a problem, we put our minds together, and we solve it. That is a formidable threat to the thing, and it learns how to use that to its advantage very quickly. So the thing wouldn't need to attack these rescuers, it would allow itself to be taken by them in some kind of body bag back to the ship. Knowing, by this point, it knows a varying level of intelligence from humans, and it would know enough, these guys are going to take me to another settlement or another camp or whatever, so I'm not going to attack them, I'm going to wait until we get there, and then I'm going to have a lot more people to infect or to take over, however you want to refer to it as. Now this is where my game idea comes in, because I would like it to be set basically a couple of hours after you've got back to the ship. Now, I don't envision it as you playing as MacReady. Maybe you can, but it's not essential. It would actually be better if it's not, for what I have in mind, because I would like to have it so that you actually play as just a guy who works on this research vessel. Some random, maybe younger guy who's less experienced. Maybe he's just a hired hand or a help on the ship, rather than a scientist. First-person style gaming. And I imagine it, as I mentioned earlier, as a combination in terms of gameplay mechanics and visuals, as a combination of Alien Isolation and Fallout 4. And what I mean by that is Alien Isolation got it right when it comes to making an Alien game. The games are not about empowerment. Again, this goes back to not having all of these guns and flamethrowers, because that's not the point of the game. You're not supposed to feel empowered, you're supposed to feel powerless. The exact opposite, of course. So, in a similar way to Alien Isolation, where you don't really get many weapons, and even when you do, they're not that effective, and it's more about using the environment as your weapon, crawling away, running away from the alien, hiding from it in lockers, ducts. Again, the ship is the perfect environment for this. So again, use your environment to escape the thing, rather than just attacking it head on. Because let's be honest, you just die immediately. The thing has proven again and again how strong it is in a hand-to-hand fight, or even against a gun. It'll kill you no problem. So don't insult the audience by trying to make them believe that they can shoot it to death. Come on now. So in the game, I'd have it so that the mechanics are essentially based in a similar way to Alien Isolation, but then the part of Fallout which I'd like to see done is the stuff that's more like having bobby pins to pick locks, sacking rooms to see what you can find, maybe health kits, med packs, that's the same thing really, maybe makeshift weapons which wouldn't have much effect, but your character wouldn't necessarily know that. You'd learn it pretty quickly though, and stuff like that. Some kind of scavenger aspect to the game. And I mean, what better place to scavenge than a research ship? There's going to be a lot of stuff to use. In a similar way to Fallout, maybe you could craft things, put them together, make them into other things, not necessarily just weapons, but tools as well. Because of course certain areas of the ship will be locked down, you're going to need to get through, maybe you'll need to cut a hole in a welded door, or cut a hole through a wall to get to a panel, that kind of thing. I want to make it fairly in-depth in that regard. But now, this is the environment, and those are the mechanics. As I said, I'd like to set it a couple of hours after you've got back to the ship, and what the guys on the ship would have essentially done, logically, is they'd have done what the guys in the movie did. They'd have taken it to their research bay or their med bay and started to check out this creature. But of course, by this point, the creature knows, I don't need to wait around as long. I can start grabbing people more quickly. So it has started to do so. It's infected a couple of people, it's started to infest the crew, but before too long, with the amount of people that are going to be on a research ship, people would start seeing weird things. And within a couple of hours, it would all start to go downhill real fast. So you are thrown literally right into the action. The ship is on lockdown at the opening of the game. Maybe you have like an intro to the game which recaps the movie in like a digitalized form, etc. But then when the gameplay starts, you're thrown into first-person view. You're in like a locker room or something on the ship. The alarms are going off. You've got shadowy hallways, the creaking hull of the ship, maybe the flickering lights, all that kind of atmospheric stuff, and also the howling wind. Obviously that's an iconic sound from the movie, one of the most iconic parts of the movie in fact. And of course the iconic boom 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 music, which you would have to have that in the game, come on, of course. And then you make your way out. You would have very little in the way of a tutorial, you just have to learn as you go, because come on, give the gamers the respect to figure it out. You don't need to spoon feed everything. You go out into the hallway and basically go from there. It's a survival game. There's no grand plan at work. I wouldn't have it so that there's some conspiracy on the ship, that some people actually knew what it was. No, just keep it simple. That's not what it was in the movie, and the movie is perfect. So don't make it overly complex. Have it so that it's just another mistake. A group of very intelligent people who made a very unintelligent mistake. And now this creature is loose. And what I'd have as far as the creature's mechanics itself is that I would like to see it in three primary forms. The first form, again in a similar way to Fallout, if you think of it this way, in Fallout you've got your basic enemies like the dogs and the bugs and the mole rats, which are fairly easy to ward off. Then you've got your second tier, which is like the dumb brutes, which is like the super mutants. And then you've got the top tier, which is the intelligent, swift and capable, which is like the androids, the synths, those robots that can kill you pretty quickly if you're not well equipped. In a similar way in this game, I'd like to see it so that you've got three distinct classes of the thing. The first one would be the Infiltrator, one that just looks like a normal human. And of course you'd come across other people. The ship's full of people, so not all of them would have been turned or killed. You would come across some people and you can have conversational dialogue with them, different dialogue for different people, again like the Fallout games. You can say different things and use different replies to figure out can you trust them or not. And depending on how the conversation goes, you can have the person come with you to fight with you, scavenge with you, but then they might turn on you. Use that trust aspect, which is touched on in the 2002 game, but it's not touched on that much. They basically just follow you around, and then at certain preset points in the game, one of them will turn into a monster. And it doesn't matter what you do, that happens regardless. Whereas in this one, like Fallout, you would actually affect the outcome. So yeah, you could pick up a metal pipe, you could go up and talk to someone and bash their head in just because you can. They might have turned out to be just a human. And you'll have to live with that. You'll have just got that wrong, and you won't be able to go back unless you restart the game or go to an earlier autosave, stuff like that, so that your decisions actually have results. And maybe killing everyone isn't the best option, because some people might have clearance that you don't have, or be able to get through a door, or know something about the ship that you don't, or where to get a certain thing that you need. All this kind of relationship building, which is such an essential part of the movie. You have to include that in the game. Now, with all of that being said, that would be like the first class, because some of those people that just look like people would actually turn out to change. If you maybe attack them or say something that roots them out and proves that they're lying, then they would burst out into the creature. And you've got a couple of options, but let's say that if you fight the creature, you've got a pretty high likeliness of being damaged by it. So a better option could be to run or to hide. But the creature, of course, could take on different forms, because that's the thing about the thing, it never looks the same twice. So I'd like to have lots of different creature designs and have them kind of happen at random, so that you never know which one it's going to be. Maybe you could have a dozen different types, or maybe even a couple dozen, just to make it really, really accurate to the movie. Because the creatures that it turns into are radically different every time. Some are more like bugs, more insect-like. Some are just straight up mutated versions of whatever it was before, like the dog creature. Some are more like a muscle-bound human. Some are just like a big fly trap type creature. It varies so much. You could have that in the game as well. So that's like the first class. The second class of villains would be just the brutes. The ones which are already in the thing form. You know, some guy who's torn through his clothes, his torso is ripped open, his whole body is basically just a mouth now, with these tendrils flapping about all over the place, just like in the movie. And that would be like the kind of enemy, in a similar way to the alien in Alien Isolation. That's the enemy which you should just straight up avoid, because it's bigger, it's faster, it's stronger. It doesn't matter what weapon you've got, he's just going to mow you down and tear you apart. That would just be the creature you've got to run away from. And even depending on how in-depth you wanted to go with the game, you could have it so that that one can actually tear through some of the walls, or just straight up rip through some of the doors, because the thing, as we've seen in the movies, is real strong. So that would be a nice mechanic to have, obviously to a certain point, because it would take a ridiculous amount of development to have a fully functional, terrible ship in every regard. Of course I wouldn't want it to go that in-depth. And then the third tier would be one which is a little bit different to Fallout, but in a similar way to stuff like the dogs and the mole rats. And this is where I'd like the interactivity to have implications down the line. Because let's say you have a discussion with one of the Type 1 creatures, which looks like a human, you root it out, but then you attack it. Let's say you manage to find a gun. Let's say you managed to find a fire axe. Let's say you found a pipe. Whatever it is, maybe you made a shiv. Whatever it is that you found, you manage to maybe beat the creature's head in, or to cut its arm off, or to shoot a limb of its body off if you shoot it in the right place, maybe a leg or an arm. Or you come across a bigger brute, and you somehow manage to damage it. Maybe not kill it, but you, like, again, shoot its hand off or something like that. What then happens, within, of course, certain preset ways, you couldn't just have it infinitely random, but within some preset ways, that limb which you chop off or shoot off, and you, the Thing fans, know exactly what I'm going to say, that becomes its own creature. Just like in the movie, when the guy's hand goes into his mouth in the 2011 version, or in the first movie when obviously the defibrillator scene, which is iconic, which then spawns the spider head. So you can have those kind of iconic transformations where if you damage the creature in a certain way, that limb will scuttle off into some room or a duct somewhere and you won't see it again. But it could randomly pop up again later in whatever smaller creature form. And maybe the smaller ones are easier to kill. Maybe. Or at least easier to stop, if not kill. So that's basically what I'd like to see. And of course, I could talk about it for hours, as you could probably tell. But yeah, I've wanted to see a survival horror version of the Thing done properly, and this is what I consider to be done properly, for quite some time. As I said, I adore the 2002 game. It's a brilliant horror game, one of my favourites. But as cool as it is, that game is actually, ironically, a lot more like Aliens than Alien. And what I mean by that is it's much more of an action horror game than a survival horror, because you just feel way too empowered. In this game, it would be much more of that Alien Isolation, you can run but you can't hide kind of vibe. And I would love to see that, to have that true, terrifying atmosphere. Because the movie, as perfect as it is, in a game, you could make it even scarier. Because for me personally, I've never found John Carpenter's The Thing to be scary. It's way too cool a movie to be scary. In the game, you could potentially make it scary, because even having it set on a dark, damp, maybe partially damaged ship, that's a pretty creepy environment, and you could really work that in well. So I'd love to see that happen. I don't have an ultimate end goal as far as the story goes. I see it more of a kill or be killed kind of game with no grand plan. As I said earlier, there's no conspiracy going on. I think some people would like that to be factored in, but I think the key to the thing is to make the focus the creature, not the people, or not the people behind the scenes, that is. So just focus on surviving. Everything else doesn't really matter that much. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I know there are other people who must love the idea of seeing another Thing game, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where would you set it? What kind of story would you have? And of course, what kind of gameplay mechanics would you have? Would you go more down the action route like the older game did, or would you like to see something more like my concept? But that's it overall for this particular video. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and if you want more gaming related content, you can of course check out my other channel, HSG, or Hammer Studios Gaming. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.